The first time I saw Ezra, he was bleeding. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, just a thin trickle from his nose, staining the collar of his crisp white shirt as he stood frozen in the middle of a crowded Brooklyn cafe. I didn't know then that I'd be the one to make his heart race so hard it'd happen again, or that he'd chase me across boroughs just to feel it one more time. It was a humid June afternoon, the kind where New York City feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I, Lucas Rivera, a 24-year-old barista with a knack for reading people, was wiping down counters at the Daily Grind when Ezra stumbled in. He was 26, lanky, with curly blonde hair that fell just shy of his shoulders and eyes like a storm over the Hudson, gray, restless, searching. He wore a tailored blazer over a band tee, a clash of polished and reckless that screamed, "I'm figuring myself out." I noticed him immediately, not because of the nosebleed, but because of the way he carried himself, like he was apologizing to the world for existing. Dude, your nose," I said, tossing him a clean rag from behind the counter. My voice was light, teasing, but my eyes lingered a second too long. He caught the rag, startled, and pressed it to his face, mumbling something about allergies. The cafe buzzed around us, hipsters typing furiously on laptops, a toddler screaming over a spilled juice. But for a moment, it was just me and him, locked in a glance that felt like a dare. "Sorry, he started, but I cut him off, leaning over the counter with a grin. "Don't apologize. Makes you look human." I winked, and his cheeks flushed a shade that rivaled the sunset outside. That's when I knew I'd gotten under his skin. Ezra Kane wasn't from Brooklyn. I learned that over the next hour as he lingered at the counter, nursing a black coffee he barely touched. He was from a small town in Oregon, raised on wide fields and conservative values, now chasing a dream as a graphic designer in the city. He'd moved to Manhattan 3 months ago, still adjusting to the chaos, still learning how to breathe in a place that demanded you run. I told him about myself. Born and raised in the Bronx, half Puerto Rican, half dreams of being a writer, stuck slinging coffee to pay rent. We traded stories like currency, each one a step closer to something unspoken. By the time he left, I'd slipped my number onto his receipt with a scribbled note. "Call me when your nose stops betraying you." He laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm, and promised he would. He didn't call that night, or the next, but on the third day, he was back, standing in the doorway of the Daily Grind with a nervous energy that made the air crackle. "I'm not here for coffee," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'm here for you." That was the start of it, the spark that set everything ablaze. Over the next few weeks, Ezra became a fixture in my life. He'd show up after my shifts, waiting outside with a shy smile and a sketchbook tucked under his arm. We'd wander the city together, from the graffiti-covered walls of Bushwick to the quiet paths of Central Park. I flirted shamelessly, leaning too close when we shared a bench, brushing his hand when we crossed the street, dropping lines like, "You sure your nose can handle me today?" He'd blush, stammer, and once, in a crowded subway car, his nose bled again, right after I whispered something particularly bold in his ear. I laughed, but the way he looked at me, like I was both a puzzle and its solution, made my chest ache. Ezra wasn't out. Not to his family, not to his coworkers, not even fully to himself. He'd grown up in a place where love like this was whispered about in shadows, something to be buried under expectations. I saw it in the way he hesitated before taking my hand in public, the way his eyes darted to check if anyone was watching. But with me, he was different, braver, bolder, like he was testing the waters of who he could be. One night, on a rooftop garden in Williamsburg, we sat under a canopy of fairy lights, the city sprawling below us like a living canvas. He was sketching me, his pencil moving in quick, confident strokes. "You're impossible to capture," he said, frustration lacing his voice. "You're too alive. Then stop drawing and start living." I replied, leaning closer until our shoulders brushed. His breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he'd pull away. Instead, he turned, his lips inches from mine, and whispered, "You're gonna ruin me, Lucas." "Good," I said, my voice barely above a breath. "I like a challenge." That was the night he kissed me. It was clumsy, desperate, full of all the things he hadn't said yet. The city hummed around us, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, mirrored by his. When we pulled apart, his nose was bleeding again, and we both laughed until tears stung our eyes. But love, I learned, isn't just stolen kisses and nosebleeds. It's the weight of the world pushing back. A week later, Ezra got a call from his father, a stern, gravelly voice I could hear through the phone, demanding he come home for a family event. "They don't know," he told me later, his voice small. "About me. About us." "Then tell them," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Or don't. But don't let them make you smaller than you are." He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told me everything. Fear, longing, and a flicker of defiance. I knew then that our story wasn't just about us. It was about the fight to be seen, to be whole, in a world that sometimes demands you hide. Ezra's defiance didn't come easy. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk between courage and caution. He'd meet me after work, his sketchbook now filled with half-finished drawings of my profile, my hands, the curve of my smile. Each one felt like a confession he wasn't ready to voice. But when I pushed, teasing, flirting, daring him to let go, He'd pulled back, his eyes clouded with the weight of a life he hadn't fully claimed. One evening, we ended up at a queer poetry slam in the East Village, a dimly lit basement bar pulsing with raw energy. The air smelled of cheap beer and courage, and the crowd was a mix of glitter-dusted dreamers and leather-clad rebels. I read a poem I'd scribbled on a napkin during my break, words about love that burns brighter than fear. The room roared with applause, and Ezra's eyes shone with something like pride. But when a stranger clapped him on the shoulder and asked if he was with me, he froze, his smile faltering. "I'm just here," he mumbled, and my heart sank. Not because I needed a label, but because I saw the war raging inside him, wanting me, wanting himself, but terrified of what it meant to admit it. Later, as we walked along the Hudson River, the city lights reflecting like scattered stars, I couldn't hold it in. "Ezra, you can't keep doing this. Hiding. It's killing you." He stopped, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You don't get it, Lucas. My family, they're not like you. They think this," he gestured between us, "is a sin, a phase. If I tell them, I lose them. And if you don't, you lose yourself." I shot back, my voice sharper than I meant. I softened, stepping closer. "I'm not asking you to choose me over them. I'm asking you to choose you." He looked at me, his eyes wet, and for a moment, I thought he'd break. Instead, he kissed me, hard, urgent, like he was trying to pour all his unsaid words into it. When he pulled back, his nose was bleeding again, and I couldn't help but laugh, even as my chest tightened. "You're a mess," I said, handing him my sleeve to wipe his face. "Your fault," he replied, a shaky smile breaking through. "You make my heart do stupid things." That night, he stayed over at my tiny Bronx apartment, the first time he hadn't bolted after a kiss. We didn't do much, just lay on my creaky mattress, sharing stories about our childhoods. His were full of church picnics and expectations. Mine were street games and dreams of escape. As dawn crept through the window, he whispered, "I want to be brave like you." "You already are," I said, and meant it. But bravery has a cost. A few days later, Ezra got a text from his sister, Lila, who'd seen a photo of us on social media. Nothing scandalous, just us laughing at a street fair, my arm slung around his shoulders. She demanded to know who I was, what we were. Ezra didn't tell her the truth. Instead, he told her I was just a friend, and the words stung more than I expected. I confronted him at a diner in Hell's Kitchen, the neon glow casting shadows on his face. "Just a friend?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Is that what I am to you?" "No," he said quickly, his hands trembling around his coffee mug. "You're everything. But I'm not ready, Lucas. I don't know how to do this." "Then figure it out," I said, standing up. "Because I'm not your secret." I walked out, my heart pounding, not sure if I'd just ended us or set us free. For 3 days, he didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at the cafe. I threw myself into work, into writing, into anything to keep the ache at bay. But every time the bell above the door chimed, I looked up, hoping it was him. On the 4th day, he was there, standing in the rain outside the daily grind, his hair plastered to his face, his eyes wild with something I couldn't name. "I told her," he said, his voice breaking. "I told Lila about us. She's pissed, but I don't care. I want you, Lucas. I'm done hiding." I pulled him inside, out of the rain, and kissed him right there in front of the counter, not caring who saw. His nose didn't bleed this time, but his smile was brighter than I'd ever seen. Telling Lila was just the start. Ezra's world didn't collapse, but it cracked. His sister called him reckless, said their parents would never understand. She wasn't wrong. When Ezra finally told his parents over a tense FaceTime call, his father's silence was louder than any words. His mother cried, quoting Bible verses like weapons. Ezra held it together until the call ended, then broke down in my arms, his sobs muffled against my chest. "I thought I was ready," he whispered. "But it hurts, Lucas. It hurts so much." I held him tighter, my own heart aching. "It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know it's real." We spent the next few weeks rebuilding, piece by piece. Ezra started therapy, something he'd avoided for years, and I went with him to a support group for queer folks navigating family rejection. The stories there were raw, jagged, but they gave him hope. Proof that love could survive even the sharpest cuts. We found new rhythms. Mornings at the cafe, evenings exploring the city, nights tangled in each other's arms. He started sketching again, bold, vibrant pieces that screamed of freedom. But the world doesn't let you heal quietly. One night, at a queer club in Chelsea, we were dancing, sweaty, carefree, lost in the music, when a guy from Ezra's office spotted us. By Monday, whispers had spread through his workplace. His boss, a self-proclaimed ally, pulled him aside and suggested he tone it down to avoid distractions. Ezra came to me that night, furious, humiliated. "They think I'm a problem," he said, pacing my apartment. "Like I'm some scandal just for existing." "Then show them you're not," I said, grabbing his hands. "You're a damn good designer. Make them see that." He did. He poured his anger into his work, creating a series of posters for a local queer youth center that went viral online. Suddenly, his name was everywhere. Ezra Kane, the artist who turned pain into beauty. His boss apologized, but Ezra didn't care. He'd found something bigger. Purpose. Our relationship deepened, too. We weren't just flirting anymore. We were building something real. He met my mom, who hugged him like he was her own, and I met his cousin, the only family member who'd reached out after the fallout. We talked about the future, moving in together, maybe getting a dog. But beneath it all, there was still a shadow. Ezra's parents hadn't spoken to him since the call. Then came the letter. Handwritten, postmarked from Oregon. It arrived on a chilly October morning. Ezra's hands shook as he opened it, and I sat beside him, ready for whatever came next. It was from his father, not an apology, but a step. "I don't understand you," he wrote, "but I'm trying. Come home for Thanksgiving. Bring Lucas." We stared at the letter, stunned. "What do I do?" Ezra asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Go," I said. "Show them who you are, who we are." The trip to Oregon was a gamble. Ezra hadn't been home in years, and now we were walking into a house that felt more like a battlefield. His parents' farm was sprawling, all golden fields and weathered barns, but the air was thick with tension. His mother, Ellen, greeted us with a tight smile. His father, Robert, offered a handshake that felt like a test. Lila was there, too, her eyes darting between us, unsure but curious. Dinner was quiet at first, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Then Robert spoke, his voice gruff. "So, Lucas, what do you do?" "I'm a barista," I said, meeting his gaze. "And a writer. I tell stories about people like us." He nodded, but his eyes flicked to Ezra, who was picking at his food. Ellen tried to keep things light, asking about New York, but the weight of the unspoken hung over us. Finally, Lila broke the silence. "Ezra, your posters, they're incredible." I showed Mom. Ellen's smile softened. "They're beautiful," she said, and for the first time, Ezra looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. That night, as we lay in the guest room, Ezra whispered, "I didn't expect this. Not yet. Give them time," I said, brushing a curl from his forehead. "They're trying." The next day, Robert took us out to the fields, showing us the land he'd worked his whole life. He didn't say much, but when Ezra mentioned a design project inspired by the farm, Robert listened, really listened. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. Back in New York, Ezra was different, lighter. He started talking about the future with a confidence I hadn't seen before. We found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, signed the lease, and celebrated with cheap wine and a dance party in our empty living room. But life doesn't let you rest. A week later, Ezra got an email from a gallery in Soho, offering him a solo show. It was his dream, but it meant exposing himself, his art, his identity, to the world. "Are you scared?" I asked as we sat on our new couch, surrounded by unpacked boxes. "Terrified," he admitted. "But I want this. I want to be seen." The night of the gallery show was electric. Ezra's pieces lined the walls, vibrant, raw, full of the love and pain he'd carried. I watched him work the room, charming curators and strangers alike, his confidence a quiet rebellion against every doubt he'd ever had. When he pulled me onto the dance floor later, under the glow of neon lights, I felt it. We'd made it through the storm. But storms don't end, they just change. A week later, Ezra's father called. He'd seen the gallery show online, read the reviews calling Ezra a rising star in queer art. He didn't say much, just, "I'm proud of you." Ezra hung up, tears streaming down his face, and I held him as he laughed and cried all at once. A year later, we were still in Brooklyn, our apartment now filled with plants, sketches, and the chaos of two lives intertwined. Ezra's art was everywhere, on gallery walls, in magazines, even on a mural in Harlem. I'd started writing a novel, inspired by him, by us, by the messy, beautiful fight to be whole. We weren't perfect. We fought, about dishes, about dreams, about how I always stole the blankets, but every argument ended with a kiss, a laugh, a promise to keep going. One spring evening, we went back to that Williamsburg rooftop, the place where we'd first kissed. The fairy lights were still there, the city still humming below. Ezra pulled me close, his hands steady, his eyes clear. "I used to think love was something to hide," he said. "But you taught me it's something to shout." I grinned, my heart racing. "You're shouting now, huh?" "Every day," he said, and kissed me, slow and sure, no blood this time, just warmth. His family was still learning, still grappling, but they called now, sent cards, even visited once. Lila was our biggest ally, texting Ezra memes and me recipes for Puerto Rican dishes she wanted to try. The world wasn't fixed. There were still stares, still whispers, still moments when Ezra's hand tightened in mine, but we faced it together. That night, as we stood on the rooftop, Ezra pulled out his sketchbook. The page was a drawing of us, tangled in each other's arms, with words scrawled beneath, "For Lucas, who made me brave." I looked at him, my throat tight with emotion, and said, "You were always brave. I just helped you see it." He smiled, that same wind chime laugh filling the air. "Then keep helping me. Forever." And I would. Because love, real love, isn't just the spark or the storm. It's the quiet moments after, the choice to stay, to fight, to build. Ezra begged to see me every day, not out of shame, but out of joy, out of a life we'd carved together, one fearless step at a time.